So now I'm going to call the regular governing board meeting to order. The time is 11:10, and we're going to go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay. Mr. Bessinger? Mr. Couch?
Here.
Ms. Escucha Brayton?
Here.
Ms. Lewis?
Here.
Mr. McCauley?
Here.
Mr. Mendez?
I'm here.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Here.
Mr. Pereira?
Present.
Mr. Preciado?
Here.
Mr. Reyna?
Here.
Mr. Rickman?
Here.
Mr. Robinson?
Here.
Dr. Sheriff?
Back at it.
Ms. Shiklian?
Here.
Mr. Chiesa?
Here.
And through the chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 3, which is approval of the consent calendars, items 12 through 15 on your agenda. Any board members' comments?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please. Public comment?
Public comment. Is there any public comment in the South, please?
No public comment in the South.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in the North?
No public comments in the North.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in the central office who would like to comment? There are no public comments in office and no indication online.
Okay, roll call, please.
Okay. Mr. Bessinger? Oh, sorry. Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Escucha Brayton?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
Yes.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Sheklian?
Aye.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Perfect. We'll move on to item 4, public comment periods, an opportunity for anyone to speak on any item that is not on today's posted agenda. Within the jurisdiction of the Air Board, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Do we have any public members?
Do we have anybody in the South that would like to comment?
No public comment.
Thank you. Any members of the public in the North?
No public comments in the North.
Are there any members of the public in the central office that would like to comment? We do have one comment online, Connie Young.
Welcome back, Connie.
Thank you. So yes, this is Connie Young. Thanks again for your support for Earth Day Fresno. The event had a good turnout and was a huge success. It was great to see Samir and other staff members there. Thanks too for my new and very cool Valley Air District Frisbee. I'll be sure to put it to good use. Next month, I'll be heading to Washington, D.C. to talk with our local members of Congress and their staff about climate change. My fellow CCL members and I believe in our democracy and the importance of talking with our elected officials about things we care about. This year, we'll be asking our members of Congress to protect the climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. As you know, Valley residents and our air quality stand to benefit from many of these provisions. So it's important that they're not bargained away for political reasons. We'll also be lobbying for bipartisan permitting reform legislation to hasten clean energy and transmission projects to enable us to electrify our homes, businesses, and transportation. We will advocate for streamlining the permitting process while maintaining high environmental review standards and ensuring that the concerns of frontline communities are included in the planning process. For California to reach its ambitious goals for reducing greenhouse gases and air pollution, it will be necessary to build the necessary infrastructure as quickly as possible. Presently, large-scale energy projects can take several years to be approved. For the sake of the climate and our air, that time frame needs to be reduced while still protecting the environment and affected communities. I'll be sure to report back to you next month. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie.
No further online comments.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 5, a report on the district's Citizen Advisory Committee activities. Manuel is sprinting up.
Good morning, Manuel Cunha, Chair of the CAC. Again, I want to thank the staff very much at the district helping. The CAC meetings have been tremendously attended in all 3 locations. We have really, with the staff and everybody, we've seen an increase of all 3 areas from the business and ag, environmental, and city participation, which is really great because now that means those folks are getting back and getting information out. In your packet, you have the report that was presented and a couple highlights. I think one of the big one was what you just finished closing an agenda board meeting on, and that was incentives. The district has gone through quite an evaluation by ARB and incentive evaluation of how all these projects were. And Siraz gave a good report with Samir on that entire support of what you folks have really did in making this thing. I mean, the incentives just are on track and no hanky-panky, no nothing, but a tremendous report was given by ARB, but by Shiraz. Also, we had some 617 reports from Shafter and other of the 4 areas of the funding, and that is continuing on. And ARB presented quite some information that they will be coming back to us with people from ARB from the different parts of the department to give specific questions need to be answered from even the truck rule and other areas of CARB. So they will be coming to our meetings now, at least by Zoom, and get some of those questions answered. Again, the report's in your packet. I know you've got a long agenda. So again, thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions for Manuel?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, one of those good items. Accept and appropriate $18.59 million in additional revenue from the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to fund and replace low dust nut harvesters and wood burning devices.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Todd DeYoung. I'm the Director of Grants and Incentives here at the Air District. Very brief presentation for you this morning, but I am here this morning seeking your board's approval to accept and appropriate $18.5 million in funding from the EPA to fund 2 specific programs here at the district, our low dust nut harvester program and our wood burning device replacement program. So just by way of a very brief background, this is not news to anyone, but as we know, incentives play a key role in the overall district strategy to reduce emissions here in the Valley, particularly focused on mobile sources, which are outside the district's regulatory authority. That authority generally rests with the federal and state government. As you've heard during the budget process, significant resources are needed to implement a successful incentive-based strategy. We're always looking for additional funding to support the programs that we operate here in the Valley. The district has orchestrated a very successful advocacy effort, and that effort has been key to significantly increasing the share of incentive funding here at the district in recent years. Letting the state, letting the federal government know just what our needs are here in the Valley has been very successful in targeting those resources here to where they're needed most. As you heard, both last month and then highlighted in the budget presentation, the district has really gained a reputation for administering successful and effective incentive programs. We presented last month the results of our most recent program review and audits, both very successful audits, and we came away from those with a clean bill of health and a lot of praise from the state oversight agency. One of the key programs that we're always very active in applying for and going after funding for is the federal Targeted Airshed Grant Program. It's really one of those key programs that we've been very successful at at getting funding for, and it usually comes out on a yearly basis. And so whenever that comes out, we're very aggressive in proposing potential projects for those funds. So on December 8th of 2022, we submitted actually 3 proposals to EPA in response to the Targeted Airshed Grant Program's most recent solicitation. Those were to replace nut harvesting equipment, replace open hearth fireplaces and old wood burning devices, and then a concept called Trucks as a Service, which facilitates the rapid deployment of heavy-duty battery electric at a significantly lower cost for small businesses. On April of this year, EPA informed us that 2 of our proposals were selected for funding. The Low Dust Nut Harvesting Equipment Program was selected for $10 million in funding, and the Wood Burning Device Changeout Program was selected for about $8.5 million in funding. So the total district award is over $18.5 million. And it's key, and this was discussed a few times here today, is this is being matched with more than $12 million in partner funding. So it's great that we're getting these awards, but there's really a significant buy-in from the community, from stakeholders, from businesses here in the Valley that are providing that extra amount of funding to make these projects work. The total awards that we got today represent about 30% of the total funding that's available nationwide. So we've been very successful in focusing funding here into the Valley. So just a little bit of a background on the Low Dust Nut Harvester Equipment Replacement Program and why it's important and why we focus on that here at the district. Your board has long prioritized addressing those fugitive dust emissions from those various harvesting activities, including supporting the development of the new low dust harvesting technologies, testing, studies, those sorts of things. Since 2018, your board has been operating an incentive program to replace conventional nut harvesting equipment with new low dust equipment. It started as a pilot program in 2018, and in 2020, it was sort of elevated to that full district program. And it's been very successful. There have been multiple studies conducted in partnership with the district, the federal government, NRCS, ag stakeholders. These were overseen by the San Joaquin Valley wide Air Pollution Study Agency that really demonstrated that there are actual benefits to this low dust nut harvesting technology, and they are effective at reducing localized PM emissions associated with those harvesting activities. The studies indicate that depending on the type of equipment you're using, you can reduce localized PM emissions by more than 40%, and in some cases up to 80%. The incentive program has successfully obligated about $15 million to date to replace 186 pieces of equipment with this new low dust nut harvesting equipment. And that represents about 1,300 tons of PM 2.5 that has been reduced. So getting to the grant details, again, we were awarded $10 million in funding for this program. That includes about 6.25% for us to administrative fees for us to operate the program. We have an existing program, so this will feed right into that. We'll utilize the existing program guidelines. This program generally funds 50% of the cost of these eligible new devices. With the funding that we have in place, we anticipate that we can fund about 120 pieces of new equipment, all the while crushing or recycling the old equipment. So the old equipment goes away, this new low dust equipment is operated in its place. As you saw during the budget presentation, there was another line item for low dust nut harvesting equipment in the amount of $15 million in the recommended budget, which would bring the total for this program for next year to about $25 million in funding. The participant cost share is estimated to be, for the $10 million grant, it's estimated to be about 50%, about $9.375 million. And then again, we're anticipating about 910 tons of PM 2.5 emission reductions with this $10 million grant. Moving to our fireplace and wood stove changeout program, this program was awarded $8.5 million in funding through the Targeted Airshed Grant Program. That includes 10% for administrative costs to operate the program. Again, we have an existing program, so this will feed right into that program and will provide additional funding for that program. To date, we've successfully obligated more than $57 million in the fireplace and wood stove changeout program to install almost 29,000 clean burning devices in Valley homes. Eligible devices for this program include electric heat pumps, new gas devices, and certified wood burning devices, but only in those areas that don't have access to pipe natural gas. Everywhere else, it's got to be the electric heat pumps or the new gas devices. We feel that this grant, we've estimated that it will fund the replacement of about 2,089 wood burning devices. Again, the applicant cost share is more than $2.7 million. So there's $2.7 million being invested by the general public in this program to facilitate those change outs. And we're forecasting 723 tons of PM reductions based on existing EPA calculation methodologies. So with that, the recommendations are before you here, and they're also in your packet. It's to accept the funding for the two projects and then approve the attached budget resolution to amend the district budget. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
When will the program be up and available?
It will be almost immediately available for new applications.
Okay.
Yeah. We have to sign a contract and get the grant award, but there's some administrative things that have to happen. But we're going to get that up and running just as quickly as we can.
This is something, if passed today, should be up on social media right away. Then it's okay. All right.
Yeah.
Member Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple questions. What does a single nut harvester go for? And also, is this normally utilized by small or large farmers?
I'm not sure I understand your first question. Single nut.
So when they use this program,
Mm-hmm.
let's say it's a small farmer
Mm-hmm.
and he wants to just replace one unit. Let's say, what does a single unit go for?
They could be upwards of $150,000. It depends on the type of unit that you purchase.
Okay.
There are some more advanced units that do a lot more that can cost, significantly more than that. But we have a cap in the program that the program won't pay more than $150,000.
Okay.
So that 50%, so up to $300,000 piece of equipment.
And do you find a number of small farmers using the program, or mainly larger?
It's a combination, actually. We've seen some of the custom harvesters that that'll go around the valley and utilize these. A lot of times the smaller farmers don't have a need for a piece of equipment because they're only utilizing it for a small amount of time during the year. So they'll contract with either a larger farmer or a custom farmer that will come in and do that work for them. But we have seen some small farmers that have taken advantage of the program.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs?
Thank you. Sure enjoyed the green St. Patrick's Day demonstration and have that wonderful picture of that giant nut harvester that engulfs the tree to harvest. Pretty impressive technology that's being developed, and so great that we can participate this and encourage getting that out there. We all want to support the small farmer, but in many ways supporting the custom harvesting is key, because that's a lot of use of the equipment compared to what a small operation is going to be able to do. So it's great that we can support the custom harvest. I wonder if a couple numbers got reversed in terms of the reductions, because under the low dust, it talks about 910 tons of PM 2.5, and under the fireplace, it talks about 723 tons of PM. And usually we think of the dust as primarily a PM 10 problem.
Yeah, so we estimate both for, we actually estimate both PM 10 and PM 2.5 for the harvest-related activity. So that is a PM 2.5 number, but you bring up a good point. There's also a greater PM 10 actually reduction, because PM 2.5 is only a subset of the total PM, say, coming from those operations. But we actually have an ability to estimate both when we did the research on the emissions. But the 2.5, the PM 2.5 as a subset of the total PM is a much smaller piece, though, of the total. You're correct.
Yeah, in some ways, I guess it's an encouraging surprise, because we think about how cost effective the wood program is for dealing with PM 2.5 and the difficulties we have with that. on the face of those numbers, it looks like the low dust nut harvesting is comparable in terms of the efficiency, the bang for the buck.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of things to look into there. But yeah, it is a cost-effective program. There, even with that subset, you do get significant reductions in PM 2.5. The other thing on the residential wood burning side you have to consider is how much do people burn? There's the actual benefit you get from that program. You average it out over, not everybody burns a lot. So there are very comparable and very cost-effective reductions in both of those programs.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Preciado.
To share. I just have a question. It's partly so the general public understands. What's the difference between the low dust nut harvester? What's the main changes and why it's so expensive to replace? Do they have low RPM engines or electric motors? So that way we understand more of that.
That's a great question. There are multiple technologies that, depending on the manufacturers, that they use to reduce dust in the process. One is lower blower speed. Some equipment uses cyclones, which actually capture the dust and pull it down. Some use water. They inject water into the process to kind of reduce the dust when they're sweeping up the rows. Others use longer chains. We're kind of getting a little bit into the weeds, but they use longer chains that separate out more of the dust before it goes into the hopper, and then it kind of spirals out from there. So it really depends on the manufacturer, and they've taken sort of multiple approaches to reduce the dust. So there's kind of multiple technologies at play.
Still going with the diesel or gas engines, or going into electric engines?
These are primarily diesel, but they're Tier 4. The cleanest diesel engines that are available, and they're generally replacing an uncontrolled or a Tier 1 or a Tier 2. So even the reductions from the engine side of it would be significant. And then there are the pull-behind units as well. And we have a requirement that the pull-behind units have to be pulled with at least a Tier 3 or cleaner engine in the program. So you can't get this new nice pull-behind unit and then put a really dirty tractor to drag it around. That would be counterproductive.
So can I just follow up on that? So as part of the PM 2.5 benefit from the improvement in the engines that are being used for the equipment?
I believe the calculation only is from the dust side. There is an incremental improvement in the engine side, but that's not captured in that particular calculation.
And I'll just note on that, but just real quick. I'm sorry, but where the emissions occur and all that's also really important. So if you got residential wood burning going on in a neighborhood, versus a very rural, say, activity, the actual benefit to people can also vary quite a bit. But one of the things that we do is we do focus the program quite a bit. If we hear concerns, for example, in the community, and we can work with a grower kind of near those concerns, one of the big priorities that the board's established actually in the past has been also focusing those funds in areas where you might see more. So that just to hit that point a little bit more on value of the program, that where and how and the nature of the PM also makes a big difference in terms of program benefit as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Thank you. I am so excited about this. I know I was a couple years ago when we talked about the pilot and the technology not being there yet. I was so disappointed. I was like, we'll keep at it. We'll keep at it. And it's so great to be here, not only with money, but as my friend back there said, he has seen some he likes. You told me at the Ag Expo you have some you like. So I look forward to just, being a partner and cheerleader on the implementation of this grant program. And I think it does, obviously the reductions are so important. And, I think about the public health benefit as well. And I think for anybody living in rural areas, we are all so aware of the season, and so just really excited. And I really want to thank the team for keeping at this and not letting go of this idea. And it's just so great to see both the technology and the money to be here to implement it. And I look forward to working with our industry partners to make sure that it's a success. Thanks.
Thank you much. Member Mendez.
Yeah, Todd, what is probably in this program the most popular piece of equipment? Is it a one pass?
I would have to defer to
sweeper?
Aaron on what would be the most popular piece of equipment that we've seen.
It's.
What does Aaron drive?
Hi, my name is Aaron Tring. I'm a program manager in the grant department who oversees all of this. Majority of the ones are by manufacturer, and Flory is the main one, and it's their 860XL, the pull behind that we see the most of.
Oh, okay. That's a pickup machine.
Pickup machine, yeah.
That's more popular than a one pass sweeper that gets rid of all the other little sweepers.
Yeah, the one we've seen the most, we've funded the most so far in our program has been the Flory pull behind PTO driven.
Right, because there's other equipment that, where you can go and actually start with the shaking of the machine, of the tree, but a lot of that technology really doesn't work if your trees get too big,
Right.
Yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, I was just kind of wondering I was thinking it would be the single sweeper, which is pretty cool because cut down all those trips and anybody that runs a bunch of those guys, it gets pretty confusing when you got a bunch of guys out there sweeping. And I always feel sorry for the foreman because he's basically chasing guys all day trying to get them in the right pattern. And thank you.
All right. I see no more board member comments. I'm going to go to the public.
Do we have any public comments in the South?
No public comment in the South.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in the North?
What a great job,
There are no public comments in the North.
Thank you. Do we have any members of the public in the Central office that would like to comment? Looks like we have one coming.
Yes, thank you, Manuel Cunha-Nisi Farmers. We hope that in August or September, we'll be able to take a group of you board members in a bus, a new clean bus, maybe electric if the battery holds us up. But the machine that Buddy was talking about, it was at the Farm Bureau. And yes, Dr. Pacheco, we are continuing, just like with the Ag Burn, with that entire district team and those folks continually looking at new technology and better ways. But the harvester that we're talking about is that you have three operations. You got to shake the tree, then you've got to sweep it, which requires a blower, and Pito knows all of those things. And then if you're going to condition it after it's put into a row, another process. So you could have four processes. And the last is picking up the product. And Aaron is right. Some of the staff here sounds like they've been farmers for years. Maybe a couple of coveralls or something, maybe. But the new machine will take the dust down approximately probably 98%. All dust. PM10 is the predominant, as we started doing almond studies in '93 out on the west side with ARB. So the new machine, yes, it won't fit bigger, older trees. So that means our farmers are going to start pruning differently and topping differently and side topping and all of that. But also, second coming along will be some of these areas in EJAG communities where we have a higher population that we're going to focus on these type of machines going. Also, there's going to be a new machine that some of the staff is going to go out and look, which is remote control. And it is a rig that floats like a hover, like a like a little helicopter, but a drone, I guess, type, but it sprays and it goes right to the edge of the road, turns around and goes right back. It has a 100-gallon tank. But again, we're looking at equipment to take care of these in areas of communities. Yeah, cost effectiveness. Small farmers can't afford to buy and deal with it. So our packing houses, processors do the harvesting for many of our growers because a 40-acre, 70-acre grower can't afford that type of an investment and the labor, etc. So management companies doing it as well as packing houses. So again, thank you very, very much for the support and the continuation of the farming industry, and especially in the almond side. And Todd, thank you very much. And Aaron again.
Thank you.
We do have one online comment. Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Hi, Janet.
Thank you. I'm really appreciating this, both for the communities that are living near the almond orchards. That would be extremely helpful to them. But I have been on 152 and some of the other roads during almond harvest, and I have been in clouds of dust where you simply cannot see. And that is a big help during almond harvest. In fact, I will avoid using 152 during almond season just to avoid that, because there are times where I wasn't sure if I was going to be in an accident or not because I couldn't see. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
No further comments online.
I'll bring it back to the board. I see Supervisor Couch, Member Couch.
Thank you. I want to make a motion to approve this. This is a big deal for Kern County, but my question for staff is, in some of these AB 617 communities, if they would like to focus on this, and I know there's some interest in that, would some of their funding be additive to this, or are we capping it at the 50% mark and no 617 money would be on top of that? That's as inartful as I can say that, but you get my point?
Yeah, I can do it. Quick response to that through the chair. This program, this is the Valley-wide program. So it's available to every community in the Valley. We have had, and I think we'll continue to have, if the AB 617 communities, the 4 selected communities, want to have tailored allocations kind of within the community. So Shafter, for example, actually had, I believe it was a $5 million or $2.5 million allocation in Shafter within their community emission reduction program. That was separate from the Valley-wide program in addition to the Valley-wide program. So there is opportunities within that as well to focus in that. So this is not a cap on anything that can happen also within these community emission reduction programs. Now, I think we've actually spent all that money, by the way, in Shafter. We had great success in that. So this would still be available, by the way, in every community.
Are we spending it? The money is in addition to what this is, the AB 617 money. But does that mean that we can use this money? Could a farmer use this money for 50% and some of the AB 617 money for an additional percentage of the same? Okay, thank you.
I'll second the motion.
And the motion has been seconded by Member Mendez. Okay, I don't see any other comments, so we're going to go to a roll call.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Ms. Escucha Brayton?
Aye.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCulley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Perfect. Great. We're going to move on to item 7, adopt the proposed PM 2.5 contingency measures. And so this is pretty important. Everything we do is pretty important around here, huh? But contingency measures, You're going to have a lot to say. But revisions and amendments to Rule 4901, the wood burning fireplace and wood burning heaters.
All right. Good morning, Chair, members of the board. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, and I'm joined by Emily Nealon, Program Manager. I'm going to go ahead and jump into this presentation. I'll give a little bit of background here, and Emily will provide some more details of what we're proposing. Just a bit of background on the challenges we have here in the Valley for air quality. As you know, we're in a valley surrounded by mountain ranges to the east, to the west, to the south. We're in a bowl. We have meteorology that can place a lid over that bowl of the valley, trapping emissions and then leading to higher concentrations of ozone, of PM 2.5, exceeding some of those standards. And so because of that, we're designated what's called extreme non-attainment for ozone for the 8-hour ozone standards, serious non-attainment for the federal PM 2.5 standards. And because of these challenges we have to get substantially more emissions reductions than other areas of the nation to achieve these federal standards. So we have to go further than anybody else really has to. We already have very strict control programs in place. We've met most stringent measures. That's a very stringent bar set by EPA. We've shown that we're meeting that, and we need to continue to push the envelope, see what else we can do to continue to get more emissions reductions between what we already have in place. So this action we're talking about today is related to PM 2.5. So we wanted to provide a little bit of background here on what is PM 2.5. This is a particulate matter that can be as small as 2.5 microns in diameter or less. So this is very small. And the illustration on the right-hand side of the slide shows a human hair with those blue particles. Those would be PM10 particles, which are larger, of course, than PM 2.5. And if you look closer, there can be roughly 4 PM 2.5 particles across the diameter of a PM10 particle. So these are very small particles that can get deep into your lungs and cause health issues. They can be either a solid particle or a liquid droplets in the air. It's very complex how this can be formed. Some of it is formed directly through the burning of organic material or different types of fuel, or formed indirectly through chemical reactions in the atmosphere that can form that secondary PM 2.5. So there's a lot of different components that make up particulate matter, and it's and the strategy to reduce PM 2.5 can be also very complex. So as I mentioned earlier, some of these particles can be very small, less than 2.5 microns in diameter. So the illustration on the right shows that the smaller the particles are, the deeper they can get into your lungs. They can enter the bloodstream and cause a number of health issues that we have here on the slide. Lung disease issues, asthma issues, respiratory symptoms, heart attacks, respiratory and cardiovascular hospitalizations, bronchitis, lung cancer. A lot of different things can come up with exposure to high concentrations of PM 2.5. So what have we been doing to address this in the Valley? Your board has adopted a number of plans and rules and regulations over the decades to reduce emissions to make sure that PM 2.5 formation is becoming less and less over time. The chart on the right-hand side, which we have in our boardrooms here as well, shows the reduction in emissions of NOx over time over about a 42-year period. NOx is a really key for us. It's a cornerstone of much of our air quality planning. That's a precursor to the formation of both ozone and a big portion of PM 2.5. So getting those NOx reductions has been key to improve both of those key pollutants for us. And we've seen reductions in over 90% from the stationary sources that we have control over here at the Air District. CARB has also adopted a number of mobile source emission controls that have reduced NOx significantly across the state and the region for mobile sources that they have jurisdiction over. And combined with what we've done and what CARB is doing, it really is the nation's toughest emissions control program. We heard a bit about some of our incentive programs this morning. We've invested about $5 billion in those programs between public and private investment, which are also getting additional emissions reductions. And through these investments, we're continuing to make progress in improving our air quality across the region. And just showing this pictorially here on these few images, this just shows and demonstrates how much things have changed here in the Valley for PM 2.5 over the past roughly 20 years. There are a couple of different averaging periods that we show in these charts. The one on the left is a daily average, a 24-hour average. So you can see on the left-hand side where we used to be in 2003 with a lot of areas in that red, orange color above federal standards. Then you can see it progressively getting better towards 2020 here, just a couple of years ago. Similar progress for the annual standard where we average this over an entire year. You can see back in 2003, we had a number of areas in the valley that were exceeding these standards, high concentrations, and you can see that progressively getting better through this period, and we expect this to continue to improve in the coming years. So to change gears now here and focus on what we're talking about this morning, this item before you is about a contingency measure and a number of measures we're putting together to meet federal requirements. So I just wanted to point out a couple of elements here that are required and some of the difficulties that we have in demonstrating our compliance with this. Like I mentioned before, we are non-attainment for a number of 8-hour ozone standards and PM 2.5 standards. So we have multiple standards in front of us that we're working towards attaining, and we have to have contingency measures in place for all of them. And just real quickly, what is a contingency measure? I'll back up real quick. What's the point of the contingency measure? So for all these standards that are in front of us that we're trying to attain by these attainment deadlines, if you happen to miss an attainment deadline, there has to be something in place that gets you more emissions reductions to help push you over that finish line. And this is required to happen automatically. One of the elements here is an automatic trigger where it needs to come into place very quickly. You need to get those emissions reductions within a 1 to 2 year period. The EPA requirements for this, the emissions reductions are pretty high, and it's difficult to find a measure or a collection of measures to meet those emissions reduction requirements from something that can be triggered right away. Like I mentioned before, we're already meeting what's called most stringent measures for our rules and regulations, meaning that we're already the most stringent in the nation for all of our rules. So trying to find additional opportunities to get more emissions reductions is very challenging when we're already so stringent with everything that we already have. Like I mentioned before, the automatic trigger, we have to get these reductions very quickly after we fail an attainment deadline or don't meet some other planning requirements. And a lot of our stationary source and industrial rules, they require a number of years for equipment to be purchased, procured, designed, engineered, implemented at a facility. You can't do this within a 1 or 2 year period. It's going to take multiple years to get this in place. So that limits it even more. It makes it more difficult to find a number of measures that could work for this. So based on all those elements, it really is difficult to find measures that fit within these constraints of a contingency measure. Now, EPA did come out with some new draft guidance on this issue just a couple of months ago on March 17th, and this came out through the urging of us here at the district from CARB and other agencies. So they came out with some draft guidance to help regions and states address this. And we wanted to point out a couple of elements here that have changed in EPA's new guidance. One of them is what's called the 1 year's worth of progress at the top part of this table here. This is how we calculate the amount of emissions reductions we need to show through our contingency measures. A change they made here was that you calculate this now based on the attainment year, your future year, instead of the base year. So now you're looking at your future where your emissions are lower because of what you're doing. You now calculate it based on that, which is helpful. There's also provisions in here where if you cannot show you're meeting the entire 1 year's worth of progress calculation, you can come up with an infeasibility justification to show that you're doing everything that you can, that there is nothing else you can do beyond what you have in place to show that if you're less than that 1 year's worth of progress number, that's justified. The time period for reductions in the old guidance EPA had, you had to get all those emissions reductions within a 1 year time period. They're now extending that or proposing to extend that up to a 2 year time period to get those emissions reductions, which provides a little more time and help. But like I mentioned, for some of our rules and regulations, it takes them many years to get some of these reductions in place through the approach that we have. And EPA's guidance, a few other points that they had in here that EPA placed in here was that the responsibility is solely on states and local regions, and the federal EPA is not required to conduct analysis or contribute measures to help with contingency for federal mobile sources. So at this point, I'll pass it over to Emily to give us some more details on our analysis for this and what we're proposing in this package.
Perfect. Thank you, John, and good morning, Mr. Chair and your board. So in light of recent court rulings and EPA actions, the district has been conducting a robust contingency measure evaluation for sources within the San Joaquin Valley. And through this, we've found a continued demonstration of the stringency of our programs, looking specifically at comprehensive evaluations conducted as part of the 2022 ozone plan, which evaluated our NOx and VOC rules, and then our 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which evaluated our PM 2.5 and NOx rules. And notably for the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, EPA did approve in July of 2020 our rules as meeting most stringent measures requirements. And this was upheld in court in April of 2022. So just further supporting that we're already doing everything that we feasibly can. And then further, there was a recent EPA Interstate Transport Federal Implementation Plan, or FIP, in March of 2023 that included emission limits that were far less stringent than our regulations. So again, just further supporting the stringency of our rules. So in our evaluation, we found limited opportunities for technologically feasible contingency measures here in the San Joaquin Valley. Through this process, we've had extensive discussions with CARB and EPA on our evaluation and our findings. And the district and CARB's evaluation was conducted for both local and mobile sources within our jurisdiction. Like I mentioned, we're already implementing MSM, or most stringent measures, for all of our rules for both stationary and area sources under our jurisdiction. We identified potential measures, which I'll get into here in the next couple of slides, for residential wood burning and fugitive dust from rural open areas. And CARB did not identify any feasible measures at this time, but their evaluation is ongoing. So our first measure for your board's consideration is within District Rule 4901, which is our rule for residential wood burning. EPA did recently approve this rule as meeting MSM, or most stringent measures. We have identified a contingency measure opportunity, so that is before your board for consideration. Specifically, the measure would establish progressively more stringent curtailment levels within the rule upon EPA issuance of approval of our contingency SIP revision as meeting requirements. We want to make sure that this is actually approved by EPA before it can go into place. And then the second portion of that is final determination by EPA that the Valley triggered one of the contingency elements. So there's 4 elements. It includes failure to meet any reasonable further progress requirement, meaning that we're making progress toward attainment of the standard, meet any quantitative milestone in an attainment plan, submit a quantitative milestone report, or lastly, attain the applicable PM 2.5 standard by its attainment date. And I know I've noted this at the last couple of meetings, but South Coast Rules does include a similar contingency provision in structure to the district's proposed contingency provision. And this was approved by EPA in April of 2022 as meeting contingency requirements for PM 2.5. So this table outlines our proposed strategy. Just for reference, our current limits in the rule for hotspot counties, which includes Madera, Fresno, and Kern, is set at 12 micrograms per meter cube for the level 1, which is no burning for all, and then 35 micrograms per meter cube for the level 2, which is no burning unless registered. And then for the non-hotspot counties of San Joaquin, Stanislaus, Merced, Kings, and Tulare, it's set at 20 and 65 for the level 1 and level 2 curtailments. So the first contingency measure, if triggered, would lower the non-hotspot county curtailment threshold for level 1 and level 2 to 12 and 35, so matching the hotspot counties. And then the second trigger would lower just the level 1 curtailment threshold by 1 microgram, so lower it to 11 micrograms per meter cubed. Our second opportunity that we've been evaluating is within District Rule 8051, which is our rule for open areas. And an open area is a vacant portion of residential or commercial lots and contiguous parcels that are not immediately adjacent to and owned and or operated by the same individual or entity. And it's important to note that this is not applicable to agricultural sources, which are subject to District Rule 4550, which is our rule for conservation management practices. So currently in the rule, urban open areas greater than half an acre and rural open areas greater than 3 acres, if disturbing 1,000 square feet or greater, must ensure soil stability and limit their visible dust emissions to no greater than 20% opacity. So through conversations with EPA, they have suggested this potential contingency measure to us to strengthen the applicability acreage for rural open areas, despite that there's minimal emission reduction opportunities. And EPA did approve a less stringent contingency measure in Imperial County in 2019 that was similar to what they were suggesting to the district. So in our current proposed package before you, we've included a commitment to consider amendments to lower the rural acreage threshold to a lower acreage, potentially 2 acres, as needed to ensure approvability of our package. And any potential amendments would be evaluated through a continued public process. We already held 2 public workshops on this measure, so any potential amendments would just continue. We would have a couple more workshops. And then we would also consider issues related to fire safety and cost implications. As you know, as John mentioned, the majority of emissions here in the Valley are made up of mobile sources. So given the fact that the district and CARB are already implementing the most stringent measures here in the nation, it's really critical that EPA do their fair share in addressing emissions under their control, specifically for contingency requirements. And there's specific opportunities with interstate trucks, locomotives, and aircraft. There's also unprecedented funding opportunities under the Inflation Reduction Act and bipartisan infrastructure law that we've advocated to be used. And EPA is currently proposing a number of regulations for sources under their control, such as locomotives and heavy-duty trucks. And those are still in the proposal phase. And while if they are finalized would help in reducing emissions in the long term, they don't assist the district and CARB in addressing contingency requirements here in the Valley. There's a lot of numbers on the slide, but this outlines our needed reductions for contingency and how we are addressing those. We are getting significant reductions from our measure within 4901, which fully satisfies our fair share reductions from sources under the district's jurisdiction. And there's a lack of additional feasible local and state measures that meet the contingency requirements. So the first table on the slide outlines the emission reductions needed and how we're fulfilling that when taking into consideration emissions from all sources. So we're over-fulfilling the PM 2.5 reductions and filling a portion of the NOx reductions. The bottom table outlines the comparison when just looking at emissions under our control, which we think is more equitable and fair. So with this approach, we are fulfilling our requirements for PM 2.5 and largely fulfilling the requirements for NOx. So with our analysis and the reductions that we're achieving, we are fulfilling contingency requirements. Just quickly to highlight on our public process, we have been hosting a number of workshops and providing multiple opportunities for public and stakeholder comments and suggestions. We've held 2 workshops in March and April of this year to present, discuss, and receive feedback on the development of our strategy, as well as solicit specific feedback on our measures. We've also provided workshop materials in both English and Spanish and provided simultaneous Spanish interpretation during all of our workshops. And no significant public comments were received during our public process. We've also provided a number of updates to your board, the Citizens Advisory Committee, and the Environmental Justice Advisory Group. So with that, the recommendations before you today are adopt the PM 2.5 contingency measure state implementation plan revision to address the PM 2.5 standard requirements under the Clean Air Act, adopt amendments to Rule 4901, wood burning fireplaces and wood burning heaters, and authorize the chair to sign the resolution. And with that, just thank you again for having us here today, and I will open up for any comments or questions.
Okay, before we get started, and Samir, I always like to boil things down. Does this get us to where we need to go, in your opinion, with EPA on our state implementation plan?
Yeah, this has been a very extensive review that we've conducted, not only on the measure side, but also on the policy side. There's been a lot of engagement with both CARB and EPA, as was mentioned, alluded to by the team here. We don't ever fully predict, what ultimately EPA will do. That's really going to be up to EPA down the road here. But what I can tell you is that based on the guidance that came out a couple of months ago, so we've really only actually had that here for a very short period of time. But based on the guidance that came out, as was laid out, we do feel like this is a fully approvable package. In fact, we're adopting proposing a couple of measures that, even in the midst of having the most stringent measures, are still able to put a few measures on the table to make this as approvable as possible. Still seeing, what the state is able to do, if anything, and then also on the federal side, if there's anything that they can do to contribute. Because as Emily talked about too, when you break down the emission sources, on our portion of the sources that we regulate, we're certainly there. But really, it's if you don't do more on the mobile sources. So, but to answer your question, we do feel it's a fully approvable package based on the guidance that was issued recently by EPA, and would anticipate that would be the outcome. But again, can't fully speak for them down the road.
And generally, that's what creates the partnership between CARB and EPA, because the mobile source emissions, planes, trains, automobiles, and aren't under our jurisdiction. So it becomes very difficult to meet the air standard without a partnership. And to some degrees, we do have a partnership. So I just wanted, before I went to comment, I just wanted to hear from you. So first up is Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much to staff again. You know, I've said it before, just really appreciate you just continuing to be in that dialogue and answering everybody's questions and going back and looking at all of the options. I think just because I don't want our board to get the wrong idea, I think, you know, if we could just have a little bit more detail on what, if can be made publicly available, you know, said here, what CARB and EPA are proposing or evaluating right now, because I think it is important to know that they are.
Yeah, so again, I definitely want to just disclaim what I'm about to say, that we're not CARB or EPA, so I can't speak for them. But our understanding of a couple of things that are being considered right now are on the state side. They're taking a look at some of the smog requirements. So if there was a contingency trigger, that, you know, they would take a look and seeing if there was a more stringent version of smog requirements that could be implemented. Again, that's still just something that's conceptual at this point, and so we're not too sure exactly what that would look like. On the federal side, what they're looking at is locomotive emissions, and this is something that the board has weighed in on repeatedly in the past. Locomotive emissions become a more significant portion of the emissions inventory into the future as we keep ratcheting down on other sources. On a relative basis, they do contribute quite a bit of the future emissions, but they're also, you know, the technology and cost and, you know, sort of how you go about reducing those emissions is something that will still be something that would need to be you know, taken into account, especially in light of what the state just recently did. CARB did adopt the locomotive measure recently. So how does all that play together? So that is something that is being looked at the federal side, but at the same time, what's very clear is that we're not sure whether we're actually going to get anything that contributes by way of contingency requirements. And that's kind of where the trick really is here, is that can you come up with a federal measure that's actually triggerable the same way that is expected of a local region or state, and there's still a lot of uncertainty around that. But we do appreciate the engagement with CARB and EPA on this. I think that whether it was a guidance or also just the robust conversations around measures and emissions inventory, there's been quite a bit of engagement with both agencies, and that provides, you know, a level of support for what we're doing here and proposing. And we do know that they're looking at some of these issues, but again, not sure until, you know, there's something proposed from either agency.
Well, and I both say this, you know, not just like to pat them on their back for doing something, but I think that really speaks to, you know, your success in the local advocacy to be able to push them to get to that place where they're considering these things on contingency. So you know, within the bounds of a contingency conversation, I think that's a long way, and, you know, you guys should definitely give yourselves credit for pushing and continuing to get even open up that conversation.
Thank you. Member Lewis. Vice Chair Lewis.
Thank you. Well, I think with your question and Dr. Pacheco Warner, mine was in line with that as well. So it seems like it's still a mystery right now until we hear from CARB and from the federal government on the things that the federal government has under their jurisdiction and control. So we'll just wait and see what they bring down and how it affects what we're doing here in the Valley. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Rickman.
Thank you, Chair. And excuse me, and just let me know if this is outside the scope of the agenda item or not. But since we are dealing with regulations, the Clean Air Act, and possible interpretation of federal law, my question is to Samir or legal counsel is that the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, has agreed to hear a case concerning major power of federal regulatory agencies, and more specifically the Chevron doctrine. So have we made a decision or even thought about doing an amicus brief?
No, to answer your question, that's not something we've looked at this point in time. I mean, we can take a look at that and see if that's something that makes sense for us. Typically, when we've filed amicus briefs in the past on cases, it's on cases that directly affect what we're doing here at the district. Not that, you know, a change in the Chevron doctrine wouldn't affect us directly, but things that are kind of more locally oriented, I think, are things that we would typically get involved with directly. I don't know if that's something that the state might also be considering, you know, at more of the state level as well, but we can take a look at that.
So I was back in DC here last week, and I was talking to some of our representatives and some federal agencies, and some of the issues that we're having here in the Valley as to air quality. And there's been some hearings in Washington about the fairness of some of the stringent regulations that we have, especially in agriculture. And you know, what they were kept on referring to me was the Chevron doctrine about the U.S. Supreme Court case coming up. So that's why, I mean, I brought it up, and I think something that we should look into and bring it back to the board, and whether we want to do an amicus brief in this case or not. But thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Member Escutia Brady.
Thank you, Chair Chiesa, and thank you to the staff on a very interesting report. I have a couple of very simple questions to a very bright group of professionals here, but is PM 2.5 found in greater quantities in some pollutants than other pollutants? And if so, which pollutants are they found in greater quantities in?
This is going to be great for the study session.
I like it.
I know.
I'll take a stab at that because I think it's a really good question. And the question, I think, also PM 2.5 is very complex. It's formed. It's either directly released, so like when you burn something, and most of the burned kind of form of pollution either comes from motor vehicles, burning fuel, coming out the exhaust, or maybe organic matter, you know, whether it's a wildfire or maybe in a residential, in a fireplace, you know, or something along those lines. That's what's called direct PM. That's just you know, you burn something and it's released. Or we talked about nut harvesting, you know, some of the activities that kick up kind of dusty type activities. You know, those also generate what are called it's emitted or it's released as PM 2.5. Then there's the other side of PM 2.5, which is the type of PM 2.5 that's formed in the atmosphere from the reaction of different chemicals, and then the release of those chemicals over different processes can generate PM 2.5. And what the common one that we talk a lot about is ammonium nitrate, which is, again, so combustion, burning something leads to a pollutant, in this case NOx, that reacts with ammonium in the atmosphere, and that becomes ammonium nitrate, or ammonia, the reaction becomes ammonium nitrate. So and that's why PM is and all of these, by the way, these different types of PM 2.5 all have different health impact kind of associated with them as well. Some contribute more or less to different things, and but all of it gets regulated as PM 2.5. And that's why when you talk about a PM 2.5 strategy, you're talking about everything from, you know, reducing dust, say, you know, at an open area, all the way over to, you know, locomotives and other that contribute, all different things that all help with reducing PM 2.5. So that's kind of the broad question, including mobile sources. Yeah.
So it sounds
Correct.
like it pretty much is in every pollutant almost. I mean,
I would just rephrase that as
burn.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, no. So there, I would just say that there's many different sources that contribute to PM 2.5. Yeah.
Okay, so second part of that is there's many apps out there that indicate air quality that a resident can check on a daily basis, and they normally give a general reference. The air quality is okay, it's good, it's bad, it's unhealthy. But is it relevant to know the level of PM 2.5, or is one to assume that if the air quality is low, there's a great amount of PM 2.5 in the air?
PAQI.
Yeah, so I think from a health protective perspective, and also in the way the regulatory framework works, it is really about that PM 2.5 concentration, that total that you see, say, measured at an air monitor, and then that gets communicated, say, through an app. Yeah, that is the value that you're looking for. There are types of PM 2.5 that can be really impactful, and I think that's where we do a lot of the outreach as well. So when there's like a major wildfire, for example, going on, and you're seeing the level spike, and you know that it's wood burning related PM 2.5, that can be some of the most impactful PM 2.5. And so while you're still looking for those AQI levels, and that's really the main metric for it, but at times it is also important to know that, especially if you have a history, if you're a sensitive population, and that's your main trigger. So that can also be very important. But to answer your question, though, the AQI is really that's the metric that is easiest to communicate, and what we kind of, different levels under that metric are what we hope to communicate in terms of, where the air quality is.
But these sources that provide the air quality status, do they literally call out the AQI? Would they literally indicate the level, whether it's good or bad in that area?
Yes. So so the air monitors and the various tools that are used to communicate that air quality data do estimate and communicate out what level you are, whether it's green or other, so yes, that information is communicated at that level.
Thank you. No more questions.
And I think the Valley Air application, right, is the RAN, that's the one that has the air boards, and is it CARB also?
Yeah, so our app does have both. It has the entire district and CARB regulatory network communicated through that app, but there's also other apps. EPA has a great app called AirNow that also includes some other air monitoring as well, especially during wildfire season. That one in particular is really useful, and we can share some more information with you on some of the tools that are available to help communicate that information out.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Dr. Sheriffs.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. The fireplace contingency looks pretty straightforward in terms of measurement, and it fits in well with the program we have and the public's understanding. I'm wondering about the dust from open areas. How many parcels are affected if we change it from 3 to 2? And how do we reach those people? How do we educate them? How do we prepare them so that they're on board and collaborative, not something else? How do we know where those people are? How do we reach them? I mean, is this once a year in a tax bill, or what?
Great questions, and I don't want to kick the can down the road on this one, but part of the response is going to be that as we continue engaging through the public process, we're going to be answering, I think, some of those key questions on the inventory. And it is hard to actually fully estimate, how many parcels kind of fall into one category or the other, but we are working on that. We're seeing if we can have some good tools for that. But yeah, we don't permit every single operation out there. So we're looking at some different data sets to see, if we can better sort of estimate that impact. But to your other question around implementation and getting the word out, yes, it is something that we'd want to outreach and in some effective way. So that's a great point. The other issue, and Supervisor Rickman has brought up this point, and something that we want to be very careful with as we go through the public process. The reason most of these activities occur is to avoid fire hazard. And so we do want to make sure that we're very careful as we communicate out the requirements and looking at cost, looking at the availability of the mowing and the disking and the different options, just making sure that the rule and the outreach, fully recognizes the use of the activity, and because we don't want to put anybody in a situation where they have a hard time, they're caught between a fire marshal and the requirement and the lack of availability maybe of options. So those are the key questions that we're actually now processing as we continue going through the public process for the rule.
Thank you. Member Mendez?
Yeah, I thought you brought up locomotives, and how you did it was actually very proper, because that's really a federal deal, and people in this country completely forget the rule of law. And I think when CARB, I think they put out some kind of rule or try to say something about, you know, that they were going to regulate locomotives is almost laughable if you look at the rule of law, because that's not their jurisdiction. I'm not saying that that doesn't need to be done, but there's a order of how things get done, and that's a federal. Anytime you're interfering with interstate transit in any form, that's actually some of the earliest case law in this country. So I think that was very good, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a federal issue. And thank you for doing that.
All right. I see no more questions or comments from board members at this time. We're going to go to the public.
Are there any public comments in the South?
No public comment in the South.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in the North?
We have no public comments in the North.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public in the Central office that would like to comment? We do have one commenter online, Janet Dietz-Kamay.
Thanks for sticking with us, Janet.
Thank you. Since becoming involved in the PM 2.5 overall discussions, I have adamantly said ban fireplace burning, indoors, outdoors, ban it. That'll reduce the PM 2.5 very quickly, especially during the months when we have the inversion. I know enforcement is a problem, but there have been other areas in the country that have done that, banned them, and we are the worst in the United States. So I guess we're going to have to do stringent measures simply to control PM 2.5. And during the wildfire, during the summer, and I expect there will be some this year with all of the undergrowth that came from all the rains. That's, I mean, if district does not acknowledge that as PM 2.5, we who have asthma do, and we don't regard that as outstanding or unusual or anything, because we suffer when we breathe it. Now, I wanted to say in the last one regarding the first discussion that I do appreciate that air purifiers are being provided to people who have clean rooms, who are developing clean rooms. That will help during inversion months. Ban residential burning, unless that is their only source of heat. And where I live, everybody has natural gas. I know there's some who do not have natural gas or any other source, and they should be exempted. Ban residential burning. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. And I meant to say thanks for sticking with us. You're now 3 hours and 25 minutes in with us, and we appreciate it. Not it. Anyone else?
We do have another commenter online, Kevin Hamilton.
Welcome, Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, excellent. So I want to thank you for your hard work on this. And obviously these two measures are critical to continuing to clean our air. I have to be honest, I mean, I still remember the days when we had 230, 240 days of exceedances a year. And I think we've come a long way since then, and it's good to see. But looking at the monitoring report, air monitoring report from 2022, I still see we're somewhere between 90 and 135 days of exceeding one of the standards somewhere in the valley on that day. And I'll be honest, I don't think this is gonna get you there. At least as I work on it and look at it. I wish it would. Nothing would make me happier. I think you've still got a SOx problem in the summertime, and those emissions are coming from stationary sources and combining with the mobile source and forming that PM 2.5. So that partnership with CARB in, working both sides of the road, so to speak, I think is going to be critical if we're ever going to make it. The progress has been great. I see nothing but good progress in the future. I certainly wouldn't oppose adding these, but to say that they're going to meet everything that we need for contingency, I think is not a correct statement. But we have what we have, and we can only do what we do. I was interested to hear a member of Congress criticize the EPA for creating a standard that was going to cost him economically. I'm a registered respiratory therapist, and all that I could think of was, I wonder how many lives we're willing to give up for that. And that's what it's always in terms of, and I think that's where the conflict often happens, is between the economy and health. Which one should be on top? In my world, if you don't have healthy workers, you won't have an economy. Others would say, well, if you don't have an economy, you won't have healthy workers. We have to find that balance somewhere along the line, but it needs to tilt toward health, because we can't just keep processing workers into polluted environments and hope that there'll always be enough people. And we're seeing that in this country right now, where we don't even have enough folks to fulfill our labor force for a number of reasons, not just this. So anyway, I certainly support adoption of these two measures, but again, just for the record, don't believe it's going to meet your contingency needs. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments, Kevin.
There's no further indication of comments online.
Okay. Any last thoughts, or I'll entertain a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve, and second by Member Shucklin. Please call the roll.
Thank you. Mr. Couch?
I will.
Mr. Couch?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Escucha Brayton?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. McCauley?
Yes.
Mr. Mendez?
Yes.
Dr. Pacheco Warner?
Yes.
Mr. Pereira?
Aye.
Mr. Preciado?
Yes.
Mr. Reyna?
Aye.
Mr. Rickman?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Sheriff?
Yes.
Ms. Shucklian?
Aye.
Mr. Chiesa?
Aye.
Through the chair, motion passes.
All right. Thank you, John and Emily. Appreciate it. Okay, on to item 8, verbal report from the California Air Resources Board and activities. Dr. Pacheco Warner.
Thank you so much. I think the only thing to mention here is last week we had a meeting among the ag industry, several state agencies, including CARB, and then the Air District with Samir and Tom around implementation and infrastructure around the Advanced Clean Fleets rule, the heavy duty transition to zero emissions. So really encouraging, lots of important issues raised and important dialogue. And I hope it'll be only the first of many such roundtables around how we get that implemented here in the Valley and make it successful. So I really want to thank our district for engaging on that, and look forward to continuing to, not just pass things at the state level, but make sure that they are implemented and that we have the right resources here in the Valley to actually execute them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On to item 9, Executive Director report.
I will keep it really, really brief. We are going to launch 2 exciting new grant programs or revamped programs. I mentioned them earlier, but the commercial landscaping program is going to be known as ZELI, the Zero Emissions Landscaping Equipment program. So there's a whole rebrand, and there is, I verified, there's no annual cap, by the way, with the revamped program, to answer Councilmember Lewis's question. So we'll be getting information out to the board on that, as well as the Clean Air, the Valley-wide air purifier program. So that those will both be out pretty soon here. It's also Bike to Work Month. So you'll see more social media on that. We had a great event here, and a lot of the staff, including myself, who hadn't biked in a little bit, admittedly, but yeah, just getting the word out about that, and just supporting those efforts. And then just lastly, we had our annual Fire Partner Coordinators meeting. That's an actual name in capital letters. Meeting yesterday, and that's where we get together every year with our land management partners to talk about the upcoming prescribed burn and wildfire season and how we could best work together to address public communication plans and everything in between that. So we had a great meeting to prepare for the summer wildfire season, and I just want to thank Dr. Pacheco-Warner for taking the time to help push for that meeting, and then being there pretty much an all-day affair on the infrastructure. I'll just say needs, challenges, and I hope opportunities here as we move forward on that. So I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair and board members, for any comments or questions.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to governing board member comments. Does any of the board members have anything to share? Are you going to? Okay.
Thank you. Just quickly, with Mr. Cunyo's comments regarding the low dust nut harvesting equipment, if he invites staff out, I'd like him also to invite board members as well, so that the things that we approve, we have the opportunity to see how they operate. So if he makes that agreement, or if he doesn't want to do it with the staff and he wants to do it with the board,
we'll show up anyway.
We'll show up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, excellent.
Quick comment.
Okay.
I don't know what time we finished the item, but at 12:01 there was a news release regarding the walnut harvesters and their $18.5 million funding. So good job. After it was ready to. He had his finger on send. Boom.
Dr. Pacheco-Warner.
Yeah, I saw the CARB chair attend this event through a coalition, and part of it was focused on school bus electrification. And I thought, not to put your barely past new positions to work already, but I thought that might be part of what we need to sort of get over that hump, or that bring people together, bring school districts together, and have that opportunity to highlight what those buses look like, and even cleaner diesel buses, as I know that, one of our largest school districts just made, those diesel purchases, and they could have at least bought like cleaner diesel buses than they actually did, right? And so there's like even that opportunity. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there as a possible thing to consider as we look to use some of those newly approved funds. Thanks.
Thank you much. Member Escutia Braden.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to thank everyone for the warm welcome, and really impressed not only with just with the sincerity and the importance of our work, and just the subject matter that we're addressing, and it's looked into very thoroughly, and just air quality impacts all of our lives, and it's just so important, and I feel honored to be part of this conversation. I particularly like the level of importance put on community outreach and education. Without an informed community, we wouldn't be doing our job. And I think the fact that this board and this agency really emphasizes community engagement is wonderful at all diverse communities. And so glad to be part of this group, and look forward to doing the good work that this agency does. Thank you.
And make sure the new members, I know we have an orientation. I want to be a part of that, because I need the primer just like everyone else, because as we talk about what creates NOx and everything else, it is just a continual learning curve. So I'd like to participate.
OYP.
What does OYP mean?
It's a new,
1 year's progress, right?
1 year's progress. That's it. Okay, Member Mendez.
Okay, real quick. I chair in Fresno County the Measure C Transportation Authority, and we do give money to school districts for buses. Now, we had a bunch of districts, rural districts, complain and wanted to make sure that we also gave money for low pollution diesel, because in the rural districts, they can't make that run with electric. And we need to stay cognizant. We don't all wear the same damn shoes. So there's no way every district and every school is going to be the same. So we still need to give money to the clean diesel that's out there, just because we got to get these kids from point A to point B.
Thank you. Member Preciado?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just my closing comments would be that I think, well, I'm really concerned about the summer season because of the rain, so much grass in the hills. And I know that the fire departments through the state are limited in resources, and it's very important collaboration. I've seen fires in Coalinga Hills, in Bayavano, the Black Mountains. I've seen fire trucks from San Diego, LA, through the whole state coming, but sometimes, you know, it's not enough manpower and not enough equipment. So the communities actually suffered that all that contamination from PM2.5, and sometimes there's nothing we can do. And I think we still need to work harder. And I think we need to also get more collaboration. Not only, I know there's a lot of collaboration from farmers, businesses, community members, but there's also a lot more that they can do. You know, let everybody involved, because some fires are intentionally, and sometimes they're by not taking care, being not careful enough to prevent a fire. So I think we also need a lot of education and a lot of working together, collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Member Robinson?
Just a shout out to staff, Samir, and your staff, just because it's such a very delicate balance that you guys have to achieve here. You know, everybody wants to speed up the process, but one lemonade out of lemons feature is that as this process kind of evolves, it allows kind of the corporate culture and the individual culture to change as well, because sometimes these are big pills. They're hard for businesses to afford, and that does take a little bit of time, and they're hard for people to swallow. So that is one feature, and so it's a real balance, and I thank you for meeting that.
Agreed. And at over 3.5 hours to the public members, I know we have a couple of public members here in Fresno, and those of you online who've stuck with us, we do appreciate. Better policy comes when there's public discussion. I agree with what Rosa had said earlier. So we do have a closed session. I'm going to go on to item 11.
Yes, thank you. Closed session item to discuss an anticipated litigation. Do we have any public comment? Anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Anyone online?
No indication of online comments.
Or in the regions,
the north or south. Do either of you have any public comments?
No public comment in the south.
No public comment in the north.
Okay, thank you. We can move to closed session.
Do we expect a report out?
And we do expect action and report.
Okay, thank you. We're adjourned to closed session.